welcome back to my channel. Today is part 3 in the Planning a Novel series, and we are going to be talking about outlining strategies. Today we're going to be getting super technical. My dog wants to be in the film. Today we are going to be getting super technical, and we are going to be talking about 3 different strategies or methods for outlining your book. And I actually will talk about this a little bit later, but I actually have not used any of these methods, like walked through them myself for any of my books, because if you watched part 1 in the series, which was on plotting versus pantsing, then you will remember that I have pantsed pretty much all of the novels that I have written. But for this book that I am currently planning, which is What Lies Above Book 2, which is the 4th book that I've written, I am planning a lot more, and right now I haven't used any of these methods. I'm just brainstorming and getting all of the ideas down, but as I was researching and looking into them, I actually like a lot of the ideas and methods that are in some of these strategies. So today I'm going to be sharing 3 strategies with you guys, and before we begin, I just want to say that all of these will not work for everyone. One of these methods I myself do not like at all, but some of you may like it, and so the point with these strategies is not to use them all, or not that you have to use them as a writer, but instead to just find which one works for you, or if none of them work, then to find the process that does work for you, because writing is a really personal process and you have to figure out what works best for you and for your book. I'm not going to spend too much time on the introduction because there is a lot of material to cover. You might want to take notes because I'm going to be giving you guys a lot of information today as we go through these 3 strategies, but I'm also going to be linking in the description box down below the links that I got a lot of this information from, because all of the links that will be in the description box, one for each strategy, have even more material in them and even more helpful tips and even some examples of how to use these strategies, or these strategies applied to actual books that are popular, like The Hunger Games, for example, which I used in my last video as an example for the brainstorming process. So if you want to check that out, there's more information down below linked, and then I will also try to that was my dog. I'm sorry. I will also try to link any other resources or any other material, so definitely check out the description box down below, and then also make sure to check out parts 1 and 2, which I will also link down below, and I will also put up in the cards throughout the video as I reference them. Alright, like I said, not going to have a long introduction, a lot to cover, so get cozy, get a snack, get a drink, get a notebook to take notes if you want, and let's get started. Alright, so the first strategy I'm going to be talking about is called the 8-point story arc, and this was invented by Nigel Watts. And I have a link down below to the Daily Writing Tips website where I got a lot of this information from, and you can go and read it yourself if you want some more detailed information, but I'm just going to be giving you the highlights, and I'm going to be giving you the 8 arcs that are discussed in this strategy. Alright, so the way that this strategy works is you are basically going to be breaking down your plot into 8 like very important points. They call them points in this strategy, and you'll see that in each of the 3 strategies I'm going to talk about, they call these important pieces different things. They call them points, they call them beats, there's different names for them, but basically they're just the highlights of your story that you really want to make sure that you hit, and then the stuff in between is more up to you. But for each strategy, the people who created these, in their opinion, there are different important points that you want to hit, and so in the 8-point story arc there are 8, and so I'm going to go over them and explain them a little bit now. So the first point out of the 8 is called stasis, and this is where you are beginning your novel showing what your main character's life is before the big event that happens that basically propels them into the story. Example for this would be, this might actually be on the website that this came from, but an example would be Cinderella sweeping the ashes before she meets the prince. So that's her everyday life with her step family, doing her everyday chores. That is an example of stasis. Okay, so then point number 2 is called the trigger, and this is the thing that is out of the main character's control that happens that starts to propel them into the main action of the story. You don't want stasis to last too long because the reader will get bored. They want to be hooked in, and that doesn't mean if you start your book off with stasis, it doesn't mean that you don't have a hook, and it doesn't mean that you don't want to pull the reader in. You want to pull them in from the first sentence and from the first page, from the first chapter. So just keep in mind, even with stasis, you want to hook the writer. You want to pull them in. You don't want it to be boring. You just want it to be interesting, but show the character's life before. Now with the trigger, this is the thing that again is out of the main character's control. Something happens that sucks them in, that changes that stasis, and that propels them into the story. For example, if you watched part 2 of this series, which was on the brainstorming, or basically what to do after you have an idea, I talked about the Hunger Games and used it as an example, and I went through kind of some main points of that strategy in order to brainstorm. So if you use the Hunger Games, for example, then the trigger would be whenever Prim's name is pulled out of the bowl at the reaping to go into the Hunger Games. That was outside of Katniss's control, and it suddenly changes everything about her ordinary life, which in the Hunger Games stasis, the book does open with stasis, which is her going hunting with Gale. That's her ordinary day-to-day life, and it shows District 12, it shows her everyday activities. The trigger happens, Prim's name is pulled, and suddenly everything changes. Which leads us to point number 3, which is called the quest, and this is where the main character goes out into the world to fix whatever happened in the trigger. Whatever problem has suddenly arisen, they're gonna go out, they're gonna make it right. They're gonna find something, fix something, save someone. This is the quest that they are going on in the novel. And I know that quest makes it sound like it's a high fantasy book. It doesn't always have to be a high fantasy book. Obviously, I know some of you do write high fantasy, but sci-fi, contemporary, anything. It's basically what is the problem, and then what is the character going to do to fix it? How are they going to go out and change something? The quest can be both pleasant and unpleasant. So for example, pleasant might be finding like a treasure map, or going after something that's seen as positive, whereas something negative would be like Prim's name being pulled out of the reaping, something that the main character does not want and they suddenly have to fix. So it can be a quest to go do or find something, or a quest to save someone. It's up to you. There's so many different kinds of quests you can have in a book. Basically, it's what is propelling the character into the story, what are they going after, how are they going to fix whatever happened out of their control in the trigger. All right, then we get to point number 4, which is called the surprise, and this is not one single event. It can be lots of different events. It's basically all of the little things that happen along the way on the quest or throughout the book that are surprising, that thwart the main character, trials that they have to go through, things that basically happen that cause a lot of problems for them, things that they have to overcome. These should be surprising. Obviously, it's called the surprise. These things should be surprising, but they also should be plausible. You want them to feel like they really could happen. And basically, you want the reader to say, I didn't see that coming, but I should have seen it coming. Things that seem real, things that seem plausible within the plot and the world, but also things that seem unexpected and surprising. All right, point number 5 is called the critical choice, and this is where the main character has to make a decision. They have to finally decide something. Up until this point, it might be possible that events are happening to the main character, but finally they have to decide. They have to make a choice themselves to go one way or go the other. And their decision can be right or it can be wrong, and that will affect, obviously, what happens later in the book. A lot of the times, their decisions are wrong, and so their wrong choices end up causing even more problems, which then they try to fix, and it just kind of spirals out of control, which is always my favorite thing about a book, is when a character has a good heart and tries to do something to fix a decision or a chance that happened before, something out of their control, whether or not they could control it. They try to fix it, and instead it just makes everything worse. That's often what happens with the critical choice, but you could have the character make the right decision. You just, again, want to have things that are surprising and engaging for the reader. So if the character is always making the right choices, that's normally not realistic, because we're all human and we all make wrong choices, even if we have good intentions sometimes. Point number 6 is called the climax, and this is where everything in the book has been building up to this point. It's the highest peak of action. The character has been going after something or looking for something. Let's say, for example, if they found a treasure map, the climax might be getting to that treasure hoard, finding it. For example, in The Hobbit, the climax will be when they get to the Lonely Mountain and the dragon is inside, and suddenly the dragon breaks out and goes to destroy the village, or the town on the lake, and it's all burnt, and they're having to defend it. They're having to fight against the dragon. The climax is when they get to the Lonely Mountain, which is their whole quest was to go there. They got there. Now we're at the climax. What's going to happen? What's that main action that they're going to have? All right, then we get to point number 7, which is called the reversal, and this is what happens after the climax, which is the result of the main character's critical choice. It's basically what happens after the critical choice, after the climax. How has the main character changed? What happens afterwards? It is super, super important to have really character-driven like plot points in your story. Obviously plot is super important, but characters are even more important. So you want to make sure that you have a strong character arc throughout the story and that the main character changes somehow, even if it's small. To use The Hobbit, for example, since I already mentioned it, Bilbo Baggins changes a lot over that story. And the reason I'm using The Hobbit is because I just read it recently, so I know it pretty well. But Bilbo Baggins, he changes a lot over the story. He really is like a homebody in the beginning. He doesn't even want to go on this quest. By the end of the story, he's a lot more courageous and confident. He stands up for things, he risks things, and so that is a really strong character arc for him. And I would say in my book, both Eli and Eva, they go through really strong character arcs, especially Eva as well. They change a lot, they learn a lot about themselves in the world. That doesn't mean they're perfect, that doesn't mean they make all the right decisions. In fact, they make a lot of wrong decisions, but something about them, even if it's a series, something in each book should change about your main character. They should learn something or grow somehow. All right, and then finally we have point 8, which is called the resolution, and this is where the story ties up. It is the finale, and you have a changed main character. In the reversal, it's showing how has your character changed, and in the resolution, you are left with the changed character. And in the 8-point story arc, they say that you should return to stasis here. If you have a standalone book, it's possible that you return to stasis, which is just going back to now they're in their everyday life, even if they are totally changed as a person, or even if they're in a completely different environment or location or setting, they're going back to the everyday. Their quest is over. They found what they were looking for, whether internally or externally. I would somewhat disagree with this though if it ends, if your book is part of a series and it ends, because for example, in What Lies Above, the resolution is a cliffhanger, so the reader might not feel like the story is resolved, but my characters still do change and there is a tiny bit of closure with the story, but it ends on a cliffhanger, so we haven't returned to stasis yet. In fact, they won't return to stasis until the end of book 3 because their entire character arc stretches across all 3 of the books. So that is the 8-point story arc. If you want to see more information about that, the link to the website Daily Writing Tips is down below, which is where I found a lot of that information. But those are the 8 points in the 8-point story arc. Those are the 8 main things that, according to this strategy, your story can have. So if that works for you, definitely go with that. Check that link down below for more information. But if you feel like, hey, I don't really connect with this, maybe this isn't really working, I have another strategy for you, which is strategy number 2, and we're going to talk about Save the Cat, which you might have heard about this because it's a very, very, very popular method, and there's a book called Save the Cat Writes a Novel, and I know that a lot of people have used this method, and this method is by Jessica Brody, and there's also a link down below to her website, and there's a PDF down there that goes into extreme detail about this method. It's called beats. There's 15 beats, so Save the Cat, there's 15 beats, and a beat is basically similar to like a point. It's again a highlight in the story. There's a PDF down there that I really, really recommend you check out. I think it's so, so helpful, and it outlines this on like a not a number line, but a timeline. That's the word I'm looking for. It outlines it on a timeline. It breaks it down in boxes. It has each of these with more information, and it actually has 3 novels, The Hunger Games, Room, and another book that I can't remember, where it goes through the 15 beats, and it uses these books as examples to highlight exactly what happens in the books and exactly how to use the 15 beats. So definitely check that out. I think it's so, so helpful. Again, I've not actually used this method for one of my novels, but I like it, and a lot of people say that it's really helpful and really useful for them, so it might be useful for you too. So the Save the Cat method divides your novel up into 2 different acts and then further divides those acts into different segments or scenes. Those segments are called critical points, so I'm going to go through and talk about each of the little segments and then each of the 15 beats, what they are for, and basically how to outline your novel with this method. Okay, so Act 1 has beats 1 through 5, Act 2 has beats 6 through 12, and Act 3 has beats 13 through 15. Okay, so the first beat in the Save the Cat method is called the opening image, and this is exactly the same as stasis, which is in the 8-point arc. This is the before for the main character. Now I do want to add something that I didn't add before with the stasis method in the 8-point arc, which is that your book, when it opens with your hook, you actually might skip stasis and go right into the inciting incident and then have flashbacks of stasis from your main character's life. You don't necessarily have to start with stasis. You can decide where the story begins. You don't necessarily have to start with the opening image or stasis. You might begin with an inciting incident. Okay, then we have the second beat, which is the statement of the theme. And this is either done by the main character or a secondary character, which they establish what the main character will learn or the theme over the book. And every book has a theme, even if you might not really know it or not. Every book sends a message. Every book has a theme for the main character or for the reader. It might be overcoming your fears, good versus evil, whatever the theme is, or you can have multiple themes. There's definitely something that the main character is going to learn over the course of the novel and how they are going to change. How they change is often directly related to the theme. So in this part, either the main character or a secondary character says something that establishes the theme for the book. That theme is then often reflected on later, which we'll get to that beat, but often that theme is then reestablished later on as the character reflects on it and realizes how much they've grown. Okay, and then beat number 3 is very similar to beat number 1, and this is the setup, and this is, again, the life before, but you want to include the flaws of the life before. So this is getting into some of the world building. What is wrong with the world, the everyday life of the character, that makes them want to change? Could often be like an oppressed government, or that they are in poverty. There's something that is going on that they need to break free of. They want freedom, they want a change, they want something. What is it about their stasis or their opening image? What is it about their everyday life that they want to change? What are the flaws in the character and the world? Okay, beat number 4 is called the catalyst, and this is the same thing as the trigger in the 8-point story arc. This is the thing that propels the main character into your story, the big change, the big event that sets them on their journey to change, find, or save something. Beat number 5 is the what next, or the debate. This is where the main character is deciding what are they going to do about the inciting incident, this big change. What are they going to do? How are they going to go and save the person, find the thing, do whatever it is that they need to do following the trigger or the catalyst. It's basically the what next. What am I going to do, being the main character speaking, what am I going to do after this sudden thing has happened that changes everything? Alright, then we get to beat number 6, which is the start of the second act, and this is where the character is going to be going out, making a decision to go out and fix, save, change, whatever it is that happened from the inciting incident. This part is called Breaks into 2 because you are breaking into the second act, and the character is making a conscious decision that they are going to leave stasis, go out, and make a change. This is where the story really starts to pick up. The character is leaving their comfortable environment and stuff is going to start happening and going wrong, which is of course what as readers we love to see in books. We get to beat number 7, which is called the B story, and this is when we start getting new characters introduced that are relevant or important to the story. Obviously when you start out in stasis, you can have characters that are already established, best friends, family members, love interests, whatever it is, but with the B story you are introducing new characters that are going to be relevant to the story, new secondary characters that are also important. It is super important and very critical that these secondary characters also have their own stories, motivations, and goals, because you do not want them to just be cookie cutter secondary characters just there for the plot or just there to serve the main character. You want them to be complex people as well. I know that sometimes, since we are living our lives in our own headspace, in our own thought processes, it can be easy to see other people as just parts of our life, but they have their own stories, they have their own lives, their own career goals, their own dreams, and flaws as well, which of course in the book you want the flaws to come out as well because nobody's perfect, but you want all of those things mixed up in the people to come out in the book as well. That just adds to the complexity of the book and the intrigue of the book. So with B stories and the introduction of new characters, start planning those characters as well, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, then we get to beat number 8, which is called Fun and Games, and I don't really know why it's called this, but that's the name for this beat, and it is basically the hook. You see the main character in their new environment, what is going on in this new part of the world where they are outside of stasis, they're outside of their comfort zone, they're in this brand new environment and they're trying to fix, save, change something, what's going on. This is the meat of the novel where they're in their quest and they are looking for something or trying to change something or survive, whatever it is that your book is, the crux of your book, this is that main meaty portion of it. Okay, then we get to beat number 9, which is called the midpoint, and this is where the character starts experiencing trouble and difficulties. It's the middle of the story, the stakes are raising, and you want the character to have what in Save the Cat is called either a false defeat or false success. I can't remember which one it is, but you either want them to have a defeat or a triumph. And the reason that it's called false defeat, or whichever one is the false goes with, a false defeat or a false victory, the reason that you want it to seem false is because either it's a false victory and it seems like they have won, but obviously you don't want them to triumph in the middle of the book because that would leave nothing to progress for the resolution. So it's a false victory. They feel like they've won, but then something happens where they realize they've either made it worse, or they haven't really triumphed. They're still in their story. They still have to do things to fix the problem. Then you might also have a false defeat, which feels like the character is in the lowest point in the book. They feel like everything has gone wrong. There's no way to get out of this situation. And then obviously they find a way to do that. Okay, then we get to beat number 10, which is called Bad Guys Close In. I love this beat's name so much. Bad Guys Close In. This is where the enemy or the villain is closing in on the main character and stuff is really starting to go wrong. Both internal and external conflicts are arising, external from the villain or the enemy and internal from the main character, whether they're feeling like they can't do it, they feel like everything is at a loss, they feel like everything is going wrong, they'll never be able to triumph. That's the internal conflict. Or they're at war with themselves about a decision. Should they do this? Should they not? What is good? What is evil? That moral grayness, perhaps. In What Lies Above, Eli has a lot of moral grayness and there's a lot of internal conflict for him. So it can be external or internal. And things are seeming to either get better or worse depending on that midpoint, depending on either the false defeat or the false victory. It might seem like it's getting better or it might seem like it's getting worse. Okay, then we get to point number 11, which is called All is Lost. And this is where the character feels like they have been completely defeated. There is no way that they can possibly triumph. This might be that they're thrown into prison or, I don't know, something happens where they feel like there's no way that they can possibly complete their quest, save the person that they love, find what they are looking for, find freedom, whatever it is in your book, that's that main theme. They feel like there's no way they can get it, all is lost. And then we have point or beat 12, which might be tied for my favorite title for a beat, and it's called Dark Night of the Soul. This is where the character is reflecting on everything when they are at rock bottom, when all has been lost. They are reflecting over everything. They have a lot of internal conflict and internal monologue. It's very thought driven. They are reflecting over their journey. They're reflecting over what it is that they are going to lose and what's that going to mean. And so Dark Night of the Soul is a dark place for the main character. If you've seen Frozen 2, Dark Night of the Soul is basically where Anna is in the depths of that cave and like everyone she loves is dead, or so she thinks, and she starts singing about how she's felt darkness before. That's Dark Night of the Soul. Okay, then we have point number 13. This is hard to do on two hands, 13, and this is called the aha moment, and this is where the character in their Dark Night of the Soul suddenly has a revelation about what it is that they should do, how they should break out, how they can overcome, how are they going to get back up on their feet and fight for what it is that they are looking for, or the person that they want to save, whatever it is, how are they going to get back up and do what needs to be done in order to triumph in this book. And then we have beat number 14, which is the finale. This is where they decide to act on what they wanted to do in the aha moment, that revelation that they had. This is where they are going to enact that plan. It's where the enemy is defeated. It's where they realize their theme and their character arc starts to come to a close. They realize what it is they've learned and how they've grown over the story. And if it's a standalone, then the world is a better place according to the Save the Cat method than it was at the beginning as we start to return to stasis. And if you are writing a series, this is not necessarily going to be the case. I can tell you absolutely that What Lies Above does not end on everyone happily coming back to stasis. Again, it ends on a cliffhanger, so we don't necessarily have the world is a better place. In fact, we have the world is at its absolute worst right now, and the main characters have to figure out how to fix that in the rest of the series. Okay, and then finally we have beat number 15, which is the final beat in this method, and it is called the final image. And this is where the main character is reflecting over their arc and their growth and the theme and how the world and themselves have changed throughout the book. How are they different now than they were in stasis? Every character should be different, as I mentioned before, internally, externally, whether in a different setting, whatever it is, but they should also be changed as a person, have learned something and grown as a person throughout their character arc in the story, and this is called the final image. It's the closing up of the book, which if you are writing a standalone, again, then this will happen at the end of the first book, but it could happen at the end of the entire series. I definitely know that my final image will not happen until the end of the third book, but I will say that even with the series, at the end of each book, the character can realize growth. Like I said, definitely a lot of growth for my characters through my first book in the series, What Lies Above, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily have to be fully resolved. It's just that you want your character to have grown and learned something about themselves in each of the books. So you could have parts of a final image at the end of each book, even if the entire final image and the entire world is not resolved, it's not a happier place yet, you can still have growth for the character. Okay, that was a lot. So if you need to process it, if you need more examples, check the description box. Again, a lot more info, some examples. This was kind of abstract. I tried to give you examples as we went, but if it still doesn't make sense, check that PDF link on Jessica Brody's website, which I included down below. Okay, so I had to just go and offload all of the footage for this video that I've already done just now because my memory card was full, and when I offloaded it, there is almost 40 minutes of footage already for this video. So I don't know how I'm going to edit this, but this is probably going to be at least a 30-minute video. So if you have stayed with me this whole time, I am amazed. Leave me a comment down below if you have watched this whole video, because I did not think it was going to be this long, but there is so much information in here. So hopefully it was well worth your time in watching it, and hopefully this has helped you. But I'm going to try to wrap this up. We do have a third strategy I'm going to talk about, but hopefully it will not take nearly as long as Save the Cat did, because that one was quite lengthy. Okay, so let's just jump right in. The third strategy is called the Snowflake Method, and it is invented by Randy, and I do not know how to pronounce his last name. I think it's pronounced like Ingermanson? He is up on the screen right here, so I do not know how to pronounce his last name. But this is the third strategy that we're going to be talking about. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to write a one-line sentence for your novel. This is similar to writing a Twitter pitch if you've ever participated in a Twitter pitch party. It's basically the one-liner that you would give someone if they asked you in an elevator, or if they just asked you in general, what is your book about? Personally, this is my least favorite question to answer because people ask me quite frequently what my book is about since my debut is releasing in August. Friends, people I've worked with before quarantine, obviously, because I haven't seen them, but on social media, whatever it is, they'll ask me, what is your book about? And I honestly struggle with this so much because I tend to be very wordy, and I will often just spin off trying to explain everything, and I'll either give them too much and spoil things, or I don't know how to make it sound unique and interesting. So writing one line synopsis for your book can be super, super, super hard. Now, my CP actually did this for me for a Twitter. If you guys can hear my dog growling, she does not want to be on the floor. She wants to be in the video. But my CP, she actually wrote a really good 2-line synopsis for the book because I have 2 point of views, so it's very difficult to put 2 point of views into one sentence. So I have a 2-sentence synopsis for the book, and so I'm going to share that with you guys just as an example of what you can do for your book. And I know that this is kind of embarrassing, but I actually don't know it by heart because I'm still trying to memorize it so that I can tell people, so I'm just gonna read it off of my computer. But the 2-line synopsis for What Lies Above is: a soldier fights for the enemy, vowing to destroy them from the inside. A betrayed exile must learn how much of her reality has been constructed by the government if she can survive the surface. So that's my little like 2-line synopsis for What Lies Above. So what you want to do is write a 1-line, if you can, or 2-line synopsis for your book. Here's a few tips. Do not use character names. Instead of saying like Mary goes back in time or whatever, you want to describe the character. For example, instead of saying like Mary, you might say a traitor's princess or whatever. So something that adds description to the character, something that tells us something about them. Their name does not tell us anything other than what they're called. Instead, you want to use adjectives or descriptive nouns that give us some context for the character. A really great resource for this, which was recommended in the link that is down below in the description box, is to look at the New York Times bestseller list, because all of the books that are on that have a 1-line synopsis for them. And I will flash up a picture real quick here of one of the New York Times bestsellers list. You can see that each book beneath the title has a 1-liner that describes the book in a very, very concise way. Okay, so then the second step that you want to do is you want to take that 1-liner and you want to expand it into a bigger paragraph. You want to add things about the beginning, the middle, and the end. So the highlights of the book, those 3 main stages of your novel, where it starts, the climax of it in the middle, what it's all leading up to, and then that resolution or that ending point, just as a skeleton. Turning that 1-liner into a paragraph, adding enough details to understand where we start, where we're going, and where we end. Okay, then for step number 3, you want to focus on characters, and you want to write a 1-page summary for each of your main characters. This can include anything from character arc, what they look like, descriptions, just different things that will be helpful for describing and remembering all of your characters and fleshing them out. Motivations, personality, goals, different things, conflict, stuff like that, all of that can go in the summary sheet. And in part 4 of this series, which will be the next video that goes up, the last one, I think, as of right now, unless I add another part 5, but as of right now, the next video in this series will be on character profiles, and we'll be delving more into how to do character pages and profiles and descriptions and things like that. So stay tuned for part 4 if you're interested more in how to plan your characters. For now, let's just move on to step 4, which is to take every sentence in your paragraph. So you started with a 1-liner, you turned it into a paragraph. Now you're going to take every sentence in your paragraph and turn it into another paragraph. So now you are building more and more and more paragraphs, adding more details, fleshing more things out. Then we get to step number 5, which is to take your character profiles that you made, those one-pagers, and you want to write one page in each character's point of view. So telling the story basically from their perspective. And this is really, really helpful actually. It's kind of confusing because a lot of these steps seem to repeat themselves, but this point in particular, I think that the reason for it is so that you can see the story from different viewpoints, because everyone sees the same story differently. And it's similar in real life. I mean, how I might see a situation versus how like my sibling or my friend might see it, you can have a totally different thought process and view. And this is often what happens with heroes and villains, is the hero sees the story from one perspective, the villain is seeing it completely different with different like motivations and drives. So having a point of view from each character can be helpful because it gets you into the headspace of what is this character thinking and feeling, what do they want, whether it's good or bad, and how is that going to affect what they do in the story. Okay, then we get to number 6, step number 6, which is to turn your one-page summary into a 4-page summary. I don't exactly know why 4 is the magic number for this, but in this particular Snowflake method, you turn your one page into 4-page, and basically you just keep adding details, keep fleshing it out. Now, one of the things I do not really like about this method is that it's kind of vague. Unlike the beats or the 8-point story arc, basically with this method you just keep adding, but it doesn't necessarily say what you should add. You as the writer have to come up with that. And again, the link down below will have more information and more description and more detail about ideas of what you can add as you expand on each of these things. So check that out if you want more information. Step number 7 seems like another repeat, which is to take your character profiles and now go and delve even deeper and make character charts, which is not just eye color and stuff like that, but it's character desires, character arcs, character changes, like connections to other characters, relationships, like everything you can possibly think of for your character. You're going to flesh them out completely by making a character chart, or you could just write all of the information in in pages and pages of information if that is more helpful or useful for you. Okay, and then step number 8 is to make a list of every single scene in the book that you know is going to happen. This one, for all of you that are plotters, you might be like, yes, this is so good, this is so helpful, and it can be helpful. But for those of us who are pantsers or plotters, like a mix, this seems so tedious and crazy to literally list out every single scene that you know is going to happen in the book. The reason why a lot of people like this, and in the Snowflake method it's helpful, is because then when you go to draft, you literally just follow the outline and write the scenes. You're just going to be taking those one-line scenes in your bullets and writing them. So you already know exactly where the story is going to go. You have the entire plot already written out basically. Now you just have to write the actual paragraphs and scenes. And then in step number 9, you're going to take each of those little bullet point scenes and you're going to make it into a paragraph, adding details about the setting, dialogue that you think of, any details that come to mind that you already know you want to have in that particular scene. You want to go ahead and add that so that later when you're drafting, you can basically just link all these paragraphs together and flesh them out, and then you have a story. So basically the story is writing itself as you are already outlining. And before you even get into drafting, you're basically already writing so that you have a lot of content to go into the story whenever you start drafting. I actually did something similar to this with my YA fantasy book, which I wrote about 60,000 words of last year, and I'm going to finish sometime in the future. But I kind of did something similar. I wrote out a ton of scene bits as I thought of them, dialogue, things that came to me, put them all in a document so that whenever I started drafting, I already had several tens of thousands of words of ideas that I had just thought during brainstorming. So I definitely think this can be helpful. It's just about whether you want to do it scene by scene by scene or just as ideas come to you. And then finally, we are at step number 10, which is to write the first draft. Pretty simple. You just want to get into it and start writing using all of this information that you have prepped in your outlining stage. Okay, so I also don't want to spend too much time on the closure of the video because I already know that it is going to be so long. Again, if you have watched this whole video, leave a comment down below because I'm interested to see how many of you stuck it out for this long, because I know that these longer videos can be a lot to absorb, but I also know there was a lot of information in it. Hopefully it helped you. Hopefully one of these methods might help you with outlining, but if not, it's okay to find your own process. Like I said, Save the Cat is pretty good for me. I haven't used it like beat by beat, but it works well with my novel, whereas the Snowflake method does not work for me at all, and that's okay. Everyone has a different process. It's just about finding what your process is. Part of me will always be a pantser at heart or a plotter at heart, and so writing really detailed outlines is hard for me, but as I do it more and as I'm on deadline, it definitely is helpful and useful. So using some of these methods can definitely be beneficial, but again, part of me will always be a pantser, so I know that going into writing What Lies Above of book 2. I'm going to be tweaking things as I draft, changing my mind. The characters definitely speak to me and make their own decisions, so I'm going to go with what they decide to do in the story. And that's okay too. If you decide to use one of these methods and you have a very detailed outline, you can still change things as you write. This is not set in stone. It's not a rule. It's not supposed to control your book. It's just supposed to guide it and help you. As I say in every one of these videos in this series, writing is messy, so find what works for you. That is all for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you stuck it out this long, thank you so much. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss the 4th part of this series and so that you don't miss all of my future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye! Oh, and I forgot to mention, if you want to connect with me on social media, my links are down below in the box, as well as the additional resources for each of the 3 methods that we talked about. Okay, I think that that's everything. Now I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye!